Okay, we're going to start with a little bit of editing here. We're going to be editing some of these tracks. I'm going to begin, let's see, we don't need to edit the narrator, the demo, the cues, the click, probably not the drums. I assume you're all done editing your drums at this point. So we're going to go to the bass. I'm going to solo my narrator track, and I'm going to hit Command Solo to solo the bass track. I'm going to start by turning it up. I'm going to turn it up to 0, and what we're going to do is listen closely to the entire bass track, and we're going to cut out anything that we don't need or want. So back here at the beginning, not hearing anything. A couple things I probably have not mentioned. I forget whether I mentioned compressing the bass track, but I know I just added this EQ. I'm just going to turn that off for a second. We'll deal with the EQ on the bass later. But what you can do is when the EQ is on, you can use it to see things that you can't hear. You see this low-end rumble down here. That's just finger noise and amp noise and rumble of air conditioners in the room or whatnot. I think this is the mic track, the mic version of the bass track. So the spectral readout here in the EQ will actually show you what's going on even when you can't hear it. So yeah, there's a lot of nasty little noises in there. So I'm going to take and mask the first part of this bass track, and it's going to come in. If you watch now, you'll see that at the beginning of this track there won't be any noise at all underneath. See, all that noise is gone. We only get the bass track when it first comes in. So that's what we want for that spot in the mix. Another important feature of Live that I need to show you is the fades. Over here in the channel header, you'll see where you can select the mixer or different effects, etc. And one of the things you can select is fades, and this will give you a dialog or a control of the fade in, fade out control for each track. This is a really, really useful effect, especially if you're trying to create something new and you don't want any pops or clicks where you've edited it. So if I pull this fade down to the right, you'll see that the track will fade in. That's probably more fade than we want, way more fade than we want for this particular kind of music. All we're really trying to do is prevent the pop at the beginning. So I'm just going to fade it right across the bar line there. And that'll make a nice clean entrance. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is find a spot where there is no music going on and see if we have any unwanted noises. So let's say right here. Yep, sounds like there's some unwanted noises right in here, in this area here. You know, somebody was goofing off in the studio and we got some noise in the track that we didn't want. So what I'm going to do is select this entire area on the bass track and hit the delete key on the keyboard. And that deletes all of that region, and then I'm going to use the fade here to fade the bass track out, and then use the fade here to fade the bass track in, and we get this nice clean sound. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go down the bass track and do that for every spot that the bass is silent. So like here, for instance. Okay, start getting some noise right in there at the end. Some unwanted noise. And all through this area, I'm seeing low frequency noise down here. If you look. And that's noise that's just going to junk up those spots in our track. So I'm going to cut all of this out. Delete. I'm going to push this forward a little bit. Zoom in. Fade a little bit. Fade this out. I think I'm going to pull that back just a little bit more. And notice when you pull back these cuts, the fade goes with it. The fade also pushes back. Yeah, that's better. And that may seem a little extreme to you right now, but trust me, once everything is playing in the track and all these instruments and voices are going, you're going to really appreciate that that's cleaned up, even though it sounds a little heavily cut at the moment. So let's look here at the end. Okay, pretty nice clean track all the way out. Just a little bit of noise at the very end. And I'm looking down here to see that, even if I can't hear it, because if you can't hear it in headphones or you can't hear it in your computer speakers, just know that anything down here in this 100 to below range will show up in people's subwoofers, even if your speakers can't reveal that detail. A good set of subwoofers in a car or a good set of headphones will reveal that noise, so we want to get rid of it. Yeah, that's pretty good and clean. So I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go solo the next bass track, the bass DI track, and I'm going to go and do the same thing. Again, low frequency noise on the front end, so I'm going to do the same thing. Just clean that up some. Show fades. Fade that in a bit. I'm going to make very similar cuts to what I made in the mic track for the bass. Just fading that in. And that's so that these two instruments don't come in differently. I want them to come in about the same. Okay, same thing here. I'm going to show you another way to edit the track. If you hit Command E on your computer keyboard, you can get an edit point. It's just a splice. Right now you notice this track, it just has the cursor, but it's not actually cut. I'm going to cut it here by hitting Command E. See how that's now spliced the track in half? And then I've got my drag bars. I can drag them left and right, and I can pull the fades back. Bracket, drag, fade. See what the noise looks like for this track. Yep, same thing, a little bit of noise here at the end. So I'm going to pull that back and pull the fade in. Yep, it makes that fade out a little cleaner. Okay, so that would be a good thing to do to your bass tracks. So I'm going to go on down to, pardon me, I'm going to go down to the acoustic guitar track, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to listen to this acoustic guitar. up here at the beginning. Remember, all the acoustic guitar tracks were recorded with a live microphone in the room, so I have an EQ here. I've done a pretty extreme EQ. I want you to listen to the guitar with the EQ on and the EQ off so you can see what this EQ is doing. One of the things I've done is cut out all of the low frequency here in the guitar because normally you have the mic really hot on an acoustic guitar situation and you're getting a lot of low frequency rumble from the room. But also, you're getting a lot of low frequency rumble from the guitar itself, which you don't necessarily want in a band context where there's a large band playing, because you've got the bass is taking care of the low end, so you don't necessarily need those frequencies coming from the guitar. And too much low end can really muddy up your mix. So I'm just going to look for some low frequency rumble here and see if I'm getting any, and I'll edit that out. Let me turn off the EQ first. Well, darn it, if I turn off the EQ, you won't be able to see it. I'm just going to turn off EQ point number 1, this point right here, the one that's dragging down all these lows. I'm going to cut it off for a second. There we go. Yeah, look at all that low frequency rumble. Before the guitar comes in. So I'm going to trim that. I'm sort of trimming it with the EQ, but I'm also going to trim it with the edit point. Now I want you to listen to this guitar with the EQ in and with the EQ out. This is with the EQ turned off, so this is just the natural sound of the guitar. Well, that's the natural sound with the compressor. Let me turn both those off. I should probably turn the volume back up on it. There we go. And this is that same spot with the EQ turned on. And with the EQ and the compressor turned on. So what I'm doing here with the EQ is, this is typical of acoustic guitars, but it also happens with some vocal mics and some microphones in general. There is a frequency that typically sticks out and really gives a lot of false coloration to the sound, and this is especially true of acoustic guitars, which already have a really strong mid-range component. So if you want to turn this frequency up so you can hear it, here is the sort of the process that I use for doing subtractive EQ. That's what this is. If this is the midline where nothing's being boosted, nothing's being cut, you'll notice that I'm not boosting any frequencies. I'm just cutting out low frequencies, cutting out a little bit of dip in the mids. Cutting frequencies is always going to be cleaner than adding frequencies, because when you add frequencies, you add noise. And when you cut frequencies, you're taking away the frequencies that you don't want, and you're also taking away noise. So the entire mix gets a little cleaner by using subtractive EQ. So what I do is I push up. This is at 1.29 right now, or 1.3 roughly. I push up the EQ, and I set a fairly mid-level to narrow bandwidth. I don't want a huge wide bandwidth. I want kind of a narrow bandwidth, so it's affecting a small number of frequencies. And I'll play the instrument on loop of some kind. So let me loop this, Command L to loop it. And just listen to a section of the instrument over and over and over again, and play with the EQ while I'm listening to it. What I'm listening to is what's the frequency that sticks out the most. So you'll see me sweeping the frequency while it's boosted and finding that one really nasty, ugly frequency that's making that instrument sound just god-awful. And then I center in on that frequency, and then I chop it so you can hear the result. see how that cleans up the sound of the acoustic guitar. And then, let's see, what else do I have to do? Could do a little bit of cleanup through here, but I'm going to save that for later since I've already shown you how to do that. Then I'm going to do the same thing EQ-wise to the other acoustic guitar, which was mic'd in a different spot and has a slightly different EQ curve to it. That's with the EQ on and off. So you can hear what that sounds like. I'm going to do the same thing here with the trimming. Just trim out this noisy spots in the beginning of the track. Turn on fades. Fade in. Etc. etc. Okay. So that's acoustic guitars, and I have a compressor on both of those, and I have it set on a pretty low ratio. It's just kind of touching the top side of the guitar a little bit. It's not hitting it super heavy, but it is attacking it pretty fast because I don't want a whole lot of punch out of the acoustic guitar. I want to chop off some of those transients to smooth out the acoustic guitar a little bit. And here's the two guitars together. You may notice that one's a little bit left and one's a little bit right. I'll talk about that a little more in the mixing section. But I'm going to go through and EQ every single one of these tracks. I have put all of the pads together into one group, so all those pads that we created are here grouped together into one track. And listen to those. Yes, pads. Now I have individual effect settings on some of these. I thought, do I? Oh no, it appears I don't. Okay, well, I will go back and EQ the pads at some point so that they fit into the mix a little bit better. Generally they have more low-end information than they need. Another thing is another instrument that needs to have the low end taken care of so that it doesn't muddy up the mix. So go through there and throw an EQ on everything, and try using the trick that I used on the acoustic guitar to tone shape each of the channels a little bit to get it sounding the way you want, and use that low pass filter or high pass filter, low cut, to dip out the low frequencies. I'll show you how to do that real quick so you know what you're doing. Number one refers to this number one little ball here, and the ball is telling you where the center frequency is. This is all low frequencies here, this is all high frequencies here. And you can turn that ball on and off using this button, and you have 8 of them. That's why this effect is called EQ8. And for every frequency that you select, you have a frequency control that determines where it's going to start rolling off. Okay. You have a gain control that determines how high or low that gain is going to be for that one. And this is I've set this to a low cut, a really steep roll off, and it does not have a gain control on it. It's not one that can be turned up or turned down. All it does is turn everything down below a set frequency. That's why the gain control is not available. And then the Q is how wide do you want the curve to be. So this would be a better demonstration. Number 3 here I've selected. The Q control determines how narrow or how wide a band of frequencies you want to affect. So I can affect just a few frequencies in a small, narrowly defined area, or I can affect a wide number of frequencies. Just play with that and see how it sounds to you. boost something way high, and then play with the Q and sweep the frequencies around, or then cut it really low and play with the Q and then sweep the frequencies around. So like dipping the frequency way down, widening the Q, sweep the frequencies around, and see what it sounds like to you, like so. This is boosting. Okay. Each of these frequency windows will give you an option for a couple different types of EQ filter shape. The one I'm using here on 3 is this peak filter. It's a bandpass. It's allowing the highs and the lows to pass through unaffected, but it's affecting a narrow band, and you can control how much of that band you want to mess with. Then we have shelving EQ, a high and low shelf on number 4, which currently don't have engaged right now. It's just sitting on 0, so I really could turn it off. It would make a difference. So you see how it's turning up an entire shelf of frequencies up and down. So that's a shelving EQ. I'm going to turn it off because I'm just not using it. Number 2 I'm also not using. So this is really what's going on in this EQ. I'm just using number 1 to chop the low frequencies and using number 3 to shape the mid-range frequencies. And let's see, you don't need to worry about anything that's going on in this area here. You can just leave it where it is. Yep. Okay, cool. So happy fun EQing and compressing. There should be one EQ and one compressor on every single channel in your mix. You must EQ every channel. Every channel needs some kind of shaping, and you must compress every channel, because every channel is either going to need some dynamic shaping using the compressor, or it's going to have some notes that are jumping out and are too loud compared to the rest of the mix. So go ahead and just dump an EQ8 and a compressor on every channel, and then solo that channel and play around with the settings on both the EQ and the compressor until you get them sounding, well, sounding like you want them to sound. Because this is your mix, and it should sound the way you like, not the way I like necessarily. It's part of the creative endeavor. We're just painting, we're finger painting here. We're just throwing colors up and seeing what sticks. So happy EQing and compressing. Squeeze thy mix.